to realize our need for God, to make time to spend alone time with Him, that we wouldn't need a priest or a preacher because God gave us a Savior, that gave us access to a Father, that when we submit to a process, not of our making but of His, we can be initiated as men into true masculinity, that we can be led by Him so we learn how to lead, that we can be loved by Him so we learn how to love. This is Ponds and Beavers. I remember being at a doctor's appointment and the nurse asking me how active I was. She was asking if I worked out barely at all, moderately, or often. I'm a somewhat fit person and have been most of my life playing sports and such, but I was sitting there and being honest with myself. All I could think about was how often I sat. I remember feeling stuck on that one thought, so much so that it took a while to answer the question. I was embarrassed because I should have said barely at all, even though I worked out a few times a week. But that's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. So even if I worked out 3 different times in a week, not including the time I slept, that's about 5 hours of working out of 112 hours in a week that I'm not. Obviously, I didn't do the math in my head in that moment, but I knew the honest answer was barely. I barely put my body through anything more exerting than walking and picking up small items each day. And basically, I represented just a normal guy. And honestly, we really do spend most of our time sitting, either at an office or driving in a car. Maybe we're standing here and there, but most of the time we're sitting. And if that wasn't bad enough, we sit in tiny efficiency spaces called cubicles or offices, or inside of a work truck or a car, all the while staring at some kind of screen. We don't even have a view of something open and free like mountains or an ocean or forest or even just rolling hills. It's usually just buildings or houses or both. And it's no wonder we get cabin fever so often. It's no wonder we're so far off track. We call things like hunting or fishing or working out at a gym fun. Those things weren't meant to be fun. We were meant to be hunters and gatherers, and the price we had to pay was to be fit enough to do that. Our way of life was the challenges we needed to be fulfilled. Imagine hunting like our ancestors had to, without the global satellites telling us if we were lost or not, or without all those expensive sweat-wicking, ultra super-duper light gear. And I just wonder how well we would do in the field without all that stuff. We blast our heaters in the winter and blast our air conditioning in the summer. Our lives revolve around comfort, so we could never imagine ourselves being the kind of man who could handle not having comforts. Yet, something inside of us won't shut up. We know deep down we weren't meant for comforts. We ignore that call, that voice, because the lie comfort tells us is that everything is okay and nothing needs to change. But that voice, that thing inside of us won't be silenced. And so we are perpetually on edge, miserable, yet profoundly comfortable with it. I call this cabin fever of the heart. We are so unfulfilled because little to none of our primal God-given instincts are being used. So of course we'd find things like hunting or working out fulfilling. Why would those things be so fulfilling? Why would walking around on a cold winter day stalking an animal or pounding out that last set in the gym as sweat soaks our shirts? Why would those things be fulfilling to us? It's because we weren't meant for comfort. We were meant to have 2 things connect and stay connected. Those 2 things are our hearts and our hands. See, God gave us the inescapable desire to be caretakers of the world around us, and that is the heart. He secondly gave us the ability to learn the skills to put our hands to whatever it took to accomplish that. But that's the problem. Our hearts aren't connected with what we put our hands to. During a time period that could be called an era of pre-industrialization, the common man worked for nobody else but for his own family and home. He grew the crops they would eat, raised and killed or hunted for the meat they would eat. If the newborn needed a place to sleep, he'd build a cradle. If the kids outgrew their beds, he'd make bigger beds. If something broke, he'd fix it. If they needed shoes, he'd make them. He would craft his own tools. There wasn't a Home Depot, a shoe store, a grocery store. Hunting and trapping for meat wasn't like driving out to someone's lease and sitting in a deer stand all cozy next to a Yeti tumbler filled with hot coffee. That's not hunting. Men would stay out for weeks, sleeping under the stars, barely eating, and lucky if they saw anything. Comfort is killing the hearts of men. It's crippling our character because we aren't enduring much at all, except sitting in traffic or being bummed out because Chipotle is out of barbacoa. it's stunting our growth because we have such tiny little dreams to match our tiny little boxes we've made for ourselves. You know, the point isn't where we fall in all this, how many comforts we have and how many comforts we have actually already given up, maybe. No, that's not the point. The point is that us letting God dictate what comforts we keep and what comforts we don't, that changes everything. Just our willingness alone to be willing to let go of whatever that thing is. You know and I know what those things are. And sometimes they change, sometimes they're different. It doesn't matter. It's not about the thing itself. It's about our hand and our heart connection. Because we will be disconnected from what we put our hands to whenever it's us, because we will always dictate ourselves into tiny, small boxes. Whereas God's got bigger things for us. It may not be the king of the world bigger things, but I have yet to meet a man who has truly given up whatever it's taken to follow God exactly where he's leading that man. And that man say that he hates his job, he hates his life, he's miserable, he's dead inside, he feels lost and directionless. I have yet to meet that man. And this is what's causing the cabin fever of the heart. Again, I'm sure you're thinking after a message like this, like, now what? Well, what now? And it's the same thing. This is merely a message. What you do is your choice in between you and God. When given a weather forecast of a bad storm rolling in, it's nobody's fault but your own. What you do with that forecast. Now, the next portion of this is meant to just give you some time to get quiet with God.